Hi, I'm Caroline, and this is a timeline of space exploration. Space exploration began around 1957. This is when the Soviet Union launched their very first satellite into space, Sputnik 1. October 4th, the successful launch day of this satellite, began the journey into space and started the world in an epic climb toward cosmic discoveries. Shortly after the Soviet Union's successful satellite launch, Laika was the first dog to orbit the Earth. Although she was not the first dog in space, she was the first to reach a full orbit around the Earth. At the time, it was too risky to send a human into space, so they used dogs as test subjects. Sadly, most of the tests failed, including Laika's. She did not make it any longer than a day, most likely due to overheating or other technical issues. And though it is tragic, this start in space exploration got us to where we are today. Less than a year after the Soviet Union's space dog launch, NASA and American Space Center joined the space race, as I like to call it, and launched their first satellite into space, Explorer 1. Although there were many failures at the beginning of the Soviet Union's approach to orbiting the Earth and sending living creatures to space, two more dogs, Belka and Stroka, were launched. They orbited the Earth for one day and then returned home safely. The dogs went on to live long lives after that. After deciding it was safe to send a man out to space, Yuri Gagarin was launched in a space capsule to orbit the Earth. Soviet Union's Gagarin became the first man in space, landing safely by ejecting upon re-entry and parachuting down to Earth. At this point, the Soviet Union had a leap in the space race to space, but it wasn't long before the first American man made it as well. Alan Shepard was sent to space in 1961 on mission Freedom 7. NASA's goal was not just to send a man to space or orbit Earth, as that had already been done, but to discover environment conditions in space and what a man's capabilities would be once there. This mission was successful and led to greater discoveries, advancements, and explorations. Both NASA and the Soviet Union began to send out many different astronauts, including Soviet Union's first female cosmonaut, Valentina Tereshkova. From the many experiments commencing space travel in 1957 to less than 10 years later in 1965, both NASA and the Soviet Union had performed many successful missions to space and back, including a milestone of Alexei Arkhipov Leonov walking in space outside of a spacecraft, and Edwin Buzz Aldrin completing experiments with exiting the vehicle once in space. The space race became serious very quickly, and in 1966, Soviet Union was able to land a probe, Luna 9, successfully on the moon. However, because the competition was so intense, many mission failures occurred in a hurry to claim the moon, resulting in the death of many fearless astronauts. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were some of the unfortunate astronauts that died in 1967 due to a flash fire in the Apollo 1 test flights. Though it may seem childish, competition is extremely important, and I believe it was what allowed for so many space advancements and discoveries to be made in such a short amount of time. Luckily, failures only lead to more success, and it was just 2 years later, on July 20th, 1969, that NASA landed two astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, on the moon. Even though America finally won the race to space, exploration and missions did not end. There was so much more to explore, and both the Soviet Union and NASA continued to send many satellites, probes, and people to space, distant planets, and other galactic objects. Because of the fascination and continuation in space discoveries, Soviet Union was able to land a probe on planet Venus and get further in their exploration of our solar system. Not long after, NASA launches a space station, Skylab, which was the second as the Soviet Union launched one in 1971. However, more research is able to be obtained with the labs and experiments that were performed on this mission. Every step in the timeline of space exploration allows for more discoveries to be made, and while a single space station, probe, or mission is seemingly insignificant, it gets humans closer and closer to finding the secrets hidden in the vast infinity of space. While it is literally impossible to completely discover the infinite area that makes up our universe, we are able to understand more of the world as we get further in our discoveries. In 1979, a space probe, Voyager 2, was able to capture images of Jupiter, and NASA was able to learn more about the diverse planets in our solar system. Voyager 2 was sent out in 1977, and it took 2 years for the probe to reach Jupiter. Then, later in 1980 and 1981, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were able to capture photos of Saturn on a flyby. These same probes reached Uranus in 1986 and Neptune in 1989. That was a whopping 12 years after they were launched. All was looking up for NASA and the progress in space exploration. But in 1986, the Challenger mission, a space shuttle with 7 astronauts on board, did not make it out of Earth's atmosphere as it exploded only 70 seconds after launch, killing all of its passengers. This was a terrible incident, and even my mother says she remembers watching this shocking event in elementary school. Many tragedies occur throughout this timeline of space travel and investigations, but this cannot and does not stop the research that is still going into the studying of the great unknown we call our universe. In 1990, Hubble Space Telescope was launched, and since then has given us amazing glimpses of the universe that we live in. Here are just a few of the incredible images that we have seen since the telescope's launch. In 1996, America made its way to Mars. With the launch of Pathfinder, we were able to look deeper into this neighboring planet. Photos were finally received after the spacecraft made it to its destination in 1997. Although this planet looks a lot like Arizona, there was so much to learn and discover once we reached its rocky surface. Now, this milestone is more of a fun fact rather than a step forward in space exploration, but in 1998, John Glenn, a 77-year-old man at the time, traveled to space in the Discovery STS-95 mission. John Glenn claimed the record of being the oldest man in space. However, this was not Glenn's first trip outside of our homely planet, because he was, in fact, the first American to orbit the Earth back in 1962. Even though we aren't going to the moon anymore or to Mars, amazing things are done at NASA every day. And even though this may not be the most productive milestone, it is still incredible that we are able to have the technology to even send humans to space. In the year 2000, NASA was able to touch down on an asteroid floating in the void of the universe and collect images of the cosmic rock Eros. Eros was the first near-Earth asteroid to be discovered, but there is only a 5% chance that it will ever in a million years collide with Earth. After so many space discoveries were made, the concept of space travel became so much simpler, and in 2001, the first tourist of space was escorted up to the ISS, International Space Station. Dennis Tito paid Russia $2 million to take him on essentially a vacation to space. Who knew space would become a tourist location? Although more major space centers laxed in their adventures, the first private company, SpaceX, was founded by Elon Musk. SpaceX has accomplished many things since then, including performing their first successful launch in 2008, creating their first reusable spacecraft and re-landing it successfully on Earth after executing a supply mission to the ISS, and finally sending a man to space in 2020. While all of these accomplishments have been done many years ago, SpaceX is the only privately owned company to create and send out spacecraft. Without the heavy influence of the government, it can be harder to progress in their space exploration, but it can also make it easier to continue to push forward in the future to discover more about the immensity of our universe. Again, in 2003, a fatal accident befalls NASA and the 7 astronauts aboard the Columbia Space Shuttle. It is devastating when events like this occur, but it goes to show how dangerous space travel is, and how intelligent humans must be to be able to build the technology to break through the barriers keeping us earthbound. It is so cool that, as a species, we are able to touch the limits and excel past what was ever thought to be possible. And of course, NASA also recovers from even the most heart-wrenching accidents, with the 2005 successful shuttle launch. Discovery was a reusable space shuttle built and first launched in 1984 with a landing system like that of an airplane. Discovery was flown 39 times before being retired. The small discoveries and findings are what makes space research so exciting. In 2006, a Stardust capsule was landed back on Earth after collecting comet dust. With this, we are able to research what the origins of our solar system may be and what materials are really lurking in space. In 2008, NASA landed a rover on Mars in an area that had never yet been discovered. It is pretty easy to discover all the areas of Earth because we can just fly, sail, drive, or walk. But it is a lot harder when you have to blast a tiny robot 140 million miles across uncharted space territory and land, controlling it from a computer back on Earth. So it is pretty amazing that we have been able to discover as much about Mars as we have today. Voyager 1 and 2 have already been mentioned previously in this timeline because they have been out in space sending back data since the 70s and are still sending us images today as they head for the edge of the galaxy. Between 2008 and 2012, the probes crossed the shock, which is a border or wave around our solar system created by the radiation of the sun. After this shock, Voyager is no longer considered to be inside of our solar system, although still remains in the Milky Way galaxy. In 2012, Voyager 1 reaches interstellar space, which is the in-between of each star's solar systems. The Voyager mission has yet to make it out of the galaxy, but they are still out there somewhere in space, at least 2 billion miles away. You know it is a long way when it takes over 30 years to get there. In fact, because it is so far away, it takes up to 12 hours to even get the signals that the probes send back to Earth. Displayed are some more pictures Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 have taken as they travel deeper into space. While it is exciting to think our now 50-year-old probes are making so much progress in discovering what lies beyond the Milky Way, there is still so much to explore inside of the galaxy we call our home. Not even deep waters of Earth have been fully discovered, let alone the infinite area that makes up space. However, every day we receive more information to build upon and start towards the next advancement. And in 2011, the best robot NASA has ever created was successfully landed on Mars, and it is still operating today. Supposedly, Curiosity, the name of this rover and its mission, have found signs that Mars might have been able to sustain life many years ago. In contrast to these amazing discoveries, in 2012 a man jumped from a space capsule and landed on Earth from about 24 miles high, further than any skydiver would dare to go. Felix Baumgartner fell for about 9 minutes at speeds of up to 360 miles per hour, breaking the speed of sound. While this is not the most productive use of our technology and space advancements, it is still remarkable that humans are able to perform insane stunts like this and not die. Although space exploration has slowed since the 21st century begun, we have still been able to complete many experiments and uncover a lot of research. Like in 2015 when lettuce was grown smoothly inside of a shuttle in space. Later in 2020, seeds were germinated and grown in space, and cookies were actually baked and able to be eaten. While this may seem silly, it really gets us closer to being able to live in space, if it is necessary. We'll see about that. In 2019, an image of a black hole was actually taken. Although black holes are technically invisible, one was spotted by the Event Horizon Telescope 55 million light-years away. Furthermore, in 2021, the James Webb Telescope was launched, and we have been able to receive images further into the universe than ever before. More space exploration is always happening, with NASA currently looking to launch a probe to research one of Jupiter's largest moons, Europa. JAXA's mission to explore Mars's moons and other plans to send humans back to the moon in 2025. But up until this point, events stated in this timeline are just a few, but some of the most momentous in the history of space exploration. So, as of now, we have reached the end of our journey. Thanks for joining me!